Syria, a country at the center of history, has had a really tough time from 1971 to 2024. It's a complicated story of dictators, civil war, and countries meddling in its affairs. The Assad family, first Hafez al-Assad and then his son Bashar al-Assad, ruled with an iron fist. Sometimes things seemed calm, but other times they cracked down hard on anyone who disagreed with them. The Syrian people have suffered greatly, from terrible fighting within the country to millions losing their homes. The Syrian Civil War, a fight with many different groups, started in 2011 and has been devastating. Understanding this time is important for understanding the Middle East and what happens when governments are oppressive, different religious groups fight, and other countries get involved. Syria's story shows us how badly war hurts people and how hard it is to rebuild a country after it's been shattered. It's a story about people being strong even when things are incredibly difficult, but it also shows how fragile peace can be and how long the effects of a dictator can last. In the next few sections, we'll look closely at this difficult time, exploring the important events and people that shaped Syria's fate. From Hafez al-Assad taking power to the terrible Syrian Civil War, we'll see what led to the situation today. We'll also look at what other countries in the region and around the world did, because sometimes their actions made the fighting worse and made it harder to build peace. Finally, we'll talk about the challenges and opportunities facing Syria as it tries to recover from the war and build a new future. 1971 was a big turning point for Syria. Hafez al-Assad, part of a political group called the Ba'ath Party, took control of the country without any fighting. Assad, from the Alawite group, which is smaller than the Sunni Muslim majority in Syria, quickly took full control. He created a government where he had all the power and didn't allow anyone to disagree with him. He made the Ba'ath Party very powerful. At first, Assad made some good changes, like improving schools, making healthcare available, and giving land to more people. But these good things were often overshadowed by his government's harsh actions. One of the biggest things that happened while Assad was in charge was Syria getting involved in the Lebanese Civil War in 1976. Assad sent Syrian soldiers to Lebanon saying he wanted to stop the fighting there. But Syria's involvement became very messy. Assad thought Lebanon should be under Syria's control and tried to use the situation to make Syria more powerful. This caused problems for both countries for many years. By the early 1980s, many people in Syria, including groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, were against Assad's rule. This led to a terrible crackdown in the city of Hama in 1982. The Hama massacre of 1982, where thousands of people were killed by Assad's forces, shocked Syria and the whole area. This terrible event stopped the uprising against Assad, but it also made people very afraid of him, showing he would do anything to stay in power. Even though other countries criticized him, Assad continued to rule harshly through the 1980s. He had a huge network of spies and police, and anyone who spoke against him was quickly punished. But Assad was also good at dealing with other countries. In the 1990s, even though many Western countries didn't like him because of his human rights record and support for militant groups, Assad made Syria important in talks between Arabs and Israelis. He talked with Israel, but only in ways that he wanted, and he stayed close with Iran. Assad's ability to deal with the complicated politics of the Middle East let him stay in power until he died in 2000. He did some good things like improving education and healthcare, but he also ruled with terror and didn't allow freedom. His son, Bashar, took over a country dealing with the mixed results of his father's rule. Bashar al-Assad, who was trained as an eye doctor, became important in politics after his older brother, Bashar, died in a car accident in 1994. Bashar became president in 2000 when his father died. People hoped he would make changes and give them more freedom. Bashar said he would improve the economy and give people more rights, but he mostly didn't do these things. There were some economic changes, but they mostly helped a small group of rich people, making things worse for everyone else. Bashar continued to silence anyone who disagreed with him. He talked about reform, but ruled like a dictator. By 2010, Syria was in a dangerous situation, with lots of anger just waiting to explode. In 2011, things changed dramatically in Syria. Peaceful protests quickly turned into a huge civil war. People were tired of not having freedom or enough money, and they went out to demand change. The government's harsh response made things much worse, leading to violence and chaos everywhere. By 2012, many different groups and even other countries were involved in the fighting, all with their own goals. Syria, once a stable country, was now in a terrible and complicated war. During these years, the fighting in Syria became even more intense. The Syrian government, rebel groups, and extremist organizations fought fiercely. Millions of people lost their homes and many died. Countries around the world didn't agree on what to do, with different countries supporting different sides. This was one of the most violent and destructive periods of the war. As the war went on, things started to change. The Syrian government, with help from its allies, began to take back control of important areas. Extremist groups became less powerful, but the fighting wasn't over. People tried to make peace, but it didn't last. The Syrian people showed how strong they were, living through the chaos and uncertainty of a country at war. After the worst of the fighting, Syria started to rebuild slowly. The damage from the war was everywhere, from destroyed cities to families without homes. People tried to fix buildings and give help to those who needed it, but it was a long and difficult process. Other countries played a big role in helping Syria rebuild and create a safe future. The Syrian conflict caused terrible loss, but the Syrian people showed great strength. The war changed the country and its people forever. As Syria looks to the future, rebuilding and making peace are huge challenges. No one knows what will happen, but people still hope for peace and stability. Syria's story shows the strength and resilience of its people, even when things were incredibly difficult.